You can type your question in the Q&A, or you can type your questions in the CakeFest chat. So now, welcome back, Mark Story.
So when we last left off, we were starting to build the file share link authenticator. So we're going to start authenticating against file share links. Previously, generated them. If you remember what those look like, we can take a look at that. Actually, we can't because the application is in a bad state. So we're just going to finish off this authenticator. And as you can see, so what we're going to do is we're going to write some code to authenticate against a file share link. So in the authentication plugin, you can actually authenticate against pretty much anything. And you just have to be able to take some credentials from a request and then turn it into an authentication result. So we can start off with we're going to use the ORM. We're going to make this configurable in case we need to use it in the future, which I don't think we will. But yeah, we'll start off with token param. We're going to read the token attribute out of the request. And so the reason for we're going to do this is we're going to update our routing. So read a routing key and use that as our parameter, or we could read like a get parameter or a request parameter. Either one of those is going to work. I'm just going to get the token parameter. And we're going to get some params. Hopefully you can't hear my screaming children. So we're just going to get the params because we've typed into against the server request interface. We don't really want to use the cake specific methods. You could get the cake specific ones, but then my editor will yell at me and I'll have to change things. So we don't have params, or we don't have the right field, then we're going to want to exit. So we'll just return a new result. And so it's good in like an authenticator if you're building one to not throw too many exceptions. They'll get handled, but it's better to return kind of what are they called? Result objects. So our credentials would be missing in this case. And then we'll get the token, which is going to come from params, from field. And then we're gonna get our share links model. Table locator. And then we're gonna use a try catch here, just to kind of show you how you could handle if you're interacting with like a third party or some other exception throwing system. You could integrate with that without having to worry about exceptions kind of bubbling up. So we're going to use a finder that doesn't exist yet. I'm a big fan of finders, so I like using them for things like this. So we're going to just call it a live token. So that's going to be the idea of like a token that hasn't expired, because we don't want people to use expired tokens for authentication, because that would be not ideal. Yeah, so we're going to find a live token and then get the record or fail. And should we, catch a record not found, right? Record not found. Yeah, if we catch a record not found exception, then we want to do like a return another result. And we can just say credentials were there, but they were invalid. What this lets us do is just kind of signal if we were to wrap this around like a RESTful API or a JSON API or something like that, we'd be able to better exception messages. That's not result interface. And then we can also provide an error message, so we could just say, we don't have no idea what happened. This is just to prevent, like, if we were to fall through, we won't fall through, but we will, just in case. I don't know. I always err on the side of being more cautious. And so the entity we can put into an authentication result can actually be anything, as long as it kind of implements like an array access or an array access interface. So anything that like that will let us, the authentication plugin will adapt those and wrap them with a decorator, and then that decorator will allow you to work with it inside the authentication system. So we haven't built this live token method, so let's do that next. Okay, so get the file share, and we'll just go down. We're just going to build a finder. So public function find live token. So much like in Jose's tutorial, we're going to use a finder with some custom options, and they always return queries, which is good. And then we're just going to, if there's no token, and we're just going to raise, throw an exception. Now this exception shouldn't happen in practice, but I find including these is a good like development type error, so you get like more helpful feedback if you're writing tests or if someone else is using your code later or future you is using your code. You could just leave this and it would just like emit like an offset, like a notice error that the key was undefined. But I much prefer to like raise exceptions, just so that I get like better feedback from the code. And also it means that the code's a little bit more type safe, and you just have to worry about fewer edge cases. We can do expires at, which is the thing we're currently worried about. So if it's less than or if it's greater than or equal to the current time, so we're going to use frozen time again. Just get the now. So this is going to how we find. So that's going to be how we find live tokens. So a live token is one where the token matches and where it expires in the future. So then we have our authenticator here, which is going to find a live token and then use it as an authentication result. And in our application, where we set up authentication, we set up a file share link authenticator. So now if we were to go back to the application, it should not display this error that there's a, there we go. So now we can still log in as per usual. And just gonna move this down a little bit so I can see. So we can still get to our files. We can still view the files, and we can get the share token. So now we just need a few more routes to make the file share tokens a little bit more useful. Just going to move this down so it doesn't overlap with the Zoom controls. Okay, so routes. So we have our authenticator, but we don't have really good routes right now. If we were to go look at our file share tokens, like our file share tokens controller, file share links, sorry. File share links, we just take a view and we take an ID, which isn't great. So what we want to do is have a token here, and then we want to do like a get by, find by token, or we can do find. We can use that find live token again. Let's use that live token, right? So then our authentication system and our kind of endpoints are all going to kind of work the same. So we're going to do two options. The token's going to go in here. Right there. And then we're going to contain the files, and then we'll figure this out later. So this is, to do redirect to the right place. Or something like that. Anyways, but if we look at our authenticator then, again, so we're relying on the request having a parameter, and then that these are the routing parameters. And so the routing parameter is not going to have a token if we were to use the ID, or if we were to even just use that passed argument, right? Because our URL is going to be like file share tokens, file share links, /view / 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even if we were to change that into a token, it would still be not great because it'll come in as a pass parameter and it won't be in that right routing parameter. So the way we can fix that is just by using routes. And so what we'll do in our routes is we're just going to add a couple custom routes. And we use custom routes for a few things. We can accomplish a few things for routes. The first is we can get like nicer URLs. The other thing we can do is, if you remember back to a few hours ago, we talked about this files view, and we have this big gnarly URL here, and we have this big gnarly URL here, right? It would be a lot better if we could get to this kind of URL where it would be a little bit simpler. So the way we can do that is again through routes. So here's our current routes. We have our fallbacks, which is like our basic stuff. And what we're going to do instead is we're going to use the builder to make some scopes. And so scopes let us do a few things. One, they let us cut down duplication in our routes. So we'll start off with the files routes, and all of these routes are going to connect to the same controller. So we'll put the controller in here. And we're going to get the route builder again. Builder again. And inside of here, we're just going to connect, some nicer looking URLs. So we'll connect one for a post, which is going to actually should be just be, yeah. Just do connect. We need a get and a post for this. So we're going to do action is going to be add. Right? Is that how this method works? Yeah, that looks right. And then we're going to give it a name. The name in this one goes in here. And this name is going to be file share links. Actually, no. This is files add. Yeah, this is files add. Am I thinking? So files add. I find I like the colon separated. Gives me a short way to separate, like create namespaces, and colon doesn't require to push shift. So just optimizing for extreme laziness or efficiency, or yeah, however you want to paint that picture. So we're going to put a get route, and it's going to go to action. It's going to go to index. And so if you have a get only route, you can use the get method, and that'll connect only a get route. So if you were to try and submit posts to this URL, it wouldn't work, which is great because then you can kind of remove a whole bunch of code from your controllers saying like, what is the request method? All those kinds of conditions can be taken away. If we're using connect, we can limit the HTTP methods that are accepted by just using set methods. And so with that, we can limit this down to just get and post. And that cuts us down. This won't reply to a patch or to a put. So that's another way you can kind of connect URLs in a way that saves you limits what clients can do. And then we're going to use the new placeholder syntax. So placeholders historically have used colons, but in one of the recent 4 releases, we switched it to braces. The reason for that is the colons have non-deterministics, have an opportunity to create confusing syntax. So right now we can do like we could do this, right? And that would be pretty straightforward. But if if it was a colon, it would be hard. Like, how do you know where ID ends and who begins, right? The way that we parse URLs is just a little bit more complicated to parse, and it also means that you couldn't put foo in the middle of a word. Like now you can do ID and then foo bar, right? So we can ensure that the ID parameter has a trailing segment on the end. With the colons, it's harder to do that. So currently both still work, but I recommend if you're connecting new routes that you switch over to the new syntax, just because it'll save you some grief in the future and make sure URLs a little bit more straightforward to read. So we're going to get, and then we're going to connect a couple more routes. So we can kind of do this for edit. So we can get nicer URLs this way. We can edit on the end. We can tack this to edit. And we can do files. This is the connect again, so we're going to do _name. The reason for the variance in the syntax is just builder connect was older, and then these methods were added on afterwards. So that's why they're a little different. One other thing we want to do is because we're passing in ID as a route parameter, it won't show up as a method parameter to the controller action. So we want to use set pass, not pasta. Set pasta would be tasty, but it's not what we're going to use right now. All right, so then we're going to connect up with delete route. We're going to connect that to post because we might be using forms, and we don't want the brackets and the routes will be ported to Cake3. I don't know. Yeah, if you want to do it, you probably could. It might actually work. Let's find out. Let's just check codes. No, Cake3. Let's just take a look. It might already be there. I don't remember. Looking at the docs is going to be hard. Show you how I can do things, or how I think. I just read the source. Put my editor into a bad state. Let's just check. Oh my goodness. Today is not my day, folks. Today is not my day. It's in compile route. Yeah, let's look for compile. Compile. Is the right route? No, it's not there. Looks like the braces are there. Yeah, braces work in Cake3 as well. So yeah, David A. Braces work in Cake3. Looks like you can't. So one limitation to both Cake3 and Cake4 is you can't mix braces and colons in the same route. Because as soon as you mix braces and colons, it'll just switch to brace only mode and your colons will be ignored. The other nice thing about switching to braces is it means you can use colons in your URLs, which is a little bit better. Yeah, so hopefully that kind of answers your question. So there we go. There's this is duplicate. There we go. Not that. Yeah. So you can, that's not a breaking change you have to address before you upgrade. Yes, you're right, computer. Okay, so that's our files row. So now we have files and then a slash. Let's just take that out so we don't get two of them. And these are all going to go to the controller. So you can see here that we don't have to redefine the controller every single time, which gives us a nice bit of simplicity in when we're reading our routes. And then we can also, yeah, the paths get shorter on this. So the paths get shorter, the parameters get shorter. Everything's just a little bit easier to read, and it turns into the exact same structure at the end of the day. So next we're going to do share tokens. So we want some better links for our file shares. So we can do files share. Yeah, let's do that. And then we'll connect this to file share links, right? And then there's no index, there's only add. It adds a post only, and it goes to, we can just call this file share links, right? So that's our add, and then there's no get. No, there is a get. Yeah, let's call it token. So this is going to be where we send people to look at file share links, and then we can do something useful there. file share links view, and then there's a delete, right? So then we have files share ID delete, which is going to go to our file share links delete, and we'll pass the ID, and this one needs to pass its token. Yeah, you're right, Martin. You can switch it around either way. You know, you could do delete ID. Yeah, I've seen like URL systems where the action is after the vowel, the noun. I guess this is the noun. With the benefit of it being like the actions are always on the end. I don't know. You can cook it either way you want. This file share delay, this file share links, file share links, file share links. Okay, and so we can kind of verify our routes if we want to see what all the routes are going to look like. You could go and like click on all the routes, but there's another utility inside of Cake that you can use, the routes command. What the routes command will do is print out your whole routes list and show you where all the routes are going to go. So we have file shares add is going to go to one place, and then there's file share token, which is going to go to a view, and there's a delete. And then we've got our actions down here, and then we've got our fallbacks, and then there's debug kits routes. You can also, if you really want, you can check. Check. Yeah, routes check. So we can do check, and then we could do like files share, ADC 123, right? That's kind of like a token. And then it's going to print out some errors saying I did an array to string conversion. Interesting. I will fix that later. And there's a view, the controller's right, it's going to pass the right parameter, and the tokens. It's going to have a token set over here. So you see T is over here, and then there's OKen. So it looks like our route's going to kind of work. Okay, so now if we go back to that files view we had, so files view, and go down to the bottom, we can change these around, and we can change that to file share links add, and then we can also go in and change this to the main, and then you can do file share links delete, and then we can just pass the ID in as well. So we can do ID is equal to like that. So one thing is what I want to say. Then you also have to switch when you generate routes. So if you have named keys in your routes, you have to have named keys when you generate URLs. You can't just pass the parameter in. The URL, the router will get really salty about that. Yeah, you can't do that. Also recently for routing, we've added another, because naming all of your routes can be a little bit taxing. If you have a small set of routes, naming every single route is doable. But in a larger application, naming all your routes can be a little bit tricky. And then you have to like fix all the names. So there's another way to generate URLs, and that's based on like the names of the controllers. So you can do file share links, add. And so this works out of the box for both the generated URLs and for like the fallback URLs and for all of the named URLs that you have. So we can either use the name or we can use a path. And so this would, if you use this syntax here with this path name, you don't have to worry about naming all your routes. You get similar short names without having to like think of what the naming conventions could be. You can just use the conventions built in for your controllers, and then that kind of works. And if you want to link to a plugin, you could do like debug kit. Like say your plugin was also named debug kit. this plugin cannot be used when defining route targets with a string URL. All right. Let's try our named route. See what that does. Okay. So we will figure out the path file piece. So we're going to look in this form. We can see that this is file shares add, which is the custom route defined. Yeah. So now we will be able to create share links. We've got 2 of them now. Yeah, we can delete that one. Okay, so now we've got some better URLs. We have a place where we can stick a file share URL, right? Because we can go into that routes. Path with nested prefix or plugin controllers. Yeah, sure, we can look at that. The path, so your path would be, we can just look in the docs. I'm pretty sure it's in the docs. If it's not, we can fix that. Let's look in the docs. Let's just look in docs. So path routing, here's your plugin, and then here's a prefix. So you have the slashes can be used for prefixes, and then you have your plugins, and then you can also do like vendor based. So there's also yet another, there's another helper if you want to use path-based URLs. You can use those scripts to generate, there's a router path URL, which gives you a little bit of a nicer helper, and then this will return an array and then you can feed into all of the other components that that use routes. So that's kind of that's an example of how that would work. Does that kind of answer your question? No problem. Let's get that server flag back up. Okay, so now we want to make that file share URL because we want to make this, right? So we want to be able to do a site. So the first thing we're going to have to do is log out. So if we look in our request, not our request, in our session. So inside of our session, we can see a URL, a user. So there's a user in here, and then there's Mark. There's all my stuff in here. So what we want to do is be able to get a different kind of entity in the session. So we're just gonna go up to here, slide in the logout URL. So now we're logged out, and then we're just gonna go in the database and fish out a token. Right. So we got a token here. So now the next thing we want to do is be able to get to the point where file share this works. Right now, it does not. So it looks like we're getting into the file share links controller, and it's trying to render a file share link, right? So what if instead of that, okay, file share links controller, what if we rendered the existing template we have and reuse it for the second view that we have, right? Like we could, or we can redirect to the other view. That's another thing that could work. So we're going to find by live token. We're going to find the token. We're going to contain files. I can write this with a method, I guess. Looks a little bit better. Contain files, and then we're going to do like a first or fail, right? First or fail, because we want to explode. And then what we can do is we can do this redirect, and then we're going to redirect to a view with a name. Well, we have a couple options here. We can render the view from the other files. So we can do this render, we can either redirect or we can render. I'm gonna we're gonna render the other template. We're gonna render files view. Yeah, we're gonna render files. Oh my gosh, can't type. And then we're gonna return that. And before that, we're gonna do this set file, and we're gonna do file share link. The reason I want to do a render is I don't want to change the URL. If we redirect, we'll go to a different view. We'll go to a different URL, and this token will be missing from the URL, which is not ideal. File shares link, files view, missing template. All right. Let's see if this works. No, files view, PHP. Okay. What if we use the right letters? Well, if we use the right letters, it works a lot better. Okay, so now we've rendered the file share view inside our file share, the files view inside of our file share view. But there's a couple more problems. So we have all these access controls. But first, let's make sure we're logged in the right way. So inside of our session, we have nothing, which is kind of good, I guess. And if we go back and check our session again, the session now contains a file share link object. And this may seem like a bad thing, but it's actually pretty helpful in that it allows us to do some other interesting logic in our application. Namely, we can start writing access control policies based on the type of authentication you've done. So normally you have like a user-based authentication, which indicates there's a session there. And then you can also authenticate through these file share links, which indicates a different type of access and a different kind of user. And so we can use that type of user to do some more powerful access controls. So you could think of this as like if they're authenticated through an API token, maybe they don't get to use the web interface, right? So you can build like a flexible, like an authentication system that knows which door you came in through. So oftentimes people ask like, how do I build an admin portal? What if the admin is just a different type of login account or a different role? Then we can gate access of the user or the authentication mechanism that they're using. So in order to do that, we would use, we could write all the checks in our controller, but there are better systems to use that. So the way we've kind of split that up in the 4.x plugins is authentication and authorization. So who you are and what you can do have been separated. It adds a little bit more complexity in some situations, but gives you a lot more flexibility in a lot more in more situations. So there's a little bit of complexity trade-off. You can still write your own like is authorized system, but we wanted to like make it easier to write more powerful and more flexible systems. If you just need a simple controller hook, there are ways to do that as well, which we won't completely get into today. But I'm sure we'll figure that out with some middleware. So I just want to make sure that authorization is installed. So if we look at composer JSON, so yeah, you would remember you would do like PHP authorization. We just do like on 2.0. I have it installed from when I wrote the code for the workshop to make sure it all worked. But that's what you would do, and then you would composer up and go from there. Okay, so now we want to integrate authorization. So the first place that authorization gets hooked into is your application class. Much like authentication, authorization applies itself as a middleware to your application, and then it is able to gate access control to the application based on what the middleware decides. The nice thing about this middleware approach is that you can deny access before your controllers get invoked if you want to. So the first thing we need is a few imports. So we'll just import, we need the authorization service, we need the authorization service interface, the middleware, and then we're going to use the ORM to resolve policies. So the authorization plugin bases itself around like record-based or entity-based access control. So kind of modeling itself on the ideas of REST, where you like make you get a resource. So a URL represents a resource. The access control system, the authorization plugin is designed around like you have a resource and you want to check access to that resource. So that resource could be an entity, like a database entity. It could be just like a piece of application, like a plain PHP object in your application that you want to check access to for like concepts like dashboards or like generic endpoints. You can build, some sort of resource that the user is accessing, or maybe it's a collection of resources. So we'll look at how to get access to collections of resources as well. Okay, so we imported all this junk, and then we're just going to implement the junk. Implements authorization service provider. And this interface seems very long-winded, but what it does is, much like authentication, it allows us to, defer creating the authorization system until we need it. So if you were to get an error, higher up in your middleware stack, then none of this code would run, which helps you stay a little bit more performant. Yeah, just do all that. And we want an ORM resolver. What the ORM resolver does is it takes the class names of your code and then resolves them to resolves policies based on the names of the ORM objects. So you can give it an entity and it'll find the right policy. Authorizations, no. And we put the resolver inside of that. Okay, so then we have to load the plugin. Kind of jumped ahead. Add plugin. Yeah, add plugin. Now, the middleware doesn't necessarily need you to load the plugin, but if you want to use the big task that authorization provides, or load the component, then loading the plugin makes a lot more sense. But if you just want the middleware, then you don't really need it. Similar to authentication, authorization comes in as a middleware, and because we defined that we use the service provider interface, we pass in the whole application, and then when the request gets down to this middleware level, it'll call this get authorization service, and all the things will work. You could also, manually construct your authorization service and pass it in here. Like if you had an auth service, from here, authorization. If you had that, maybe you're using like a DI container and wanted to extract it out of a DI container, you could do that too. So yeah, authorization should always come after authentication, because you can't really check to see if someone can do something until you know who they are. It's an easy way to think about it. Also, the code will just scream at you if you do it the wrong way around. So now if we go to our application, we should see a new type of error. Yeah, we should see that the server's not running. Oh, line 116, yes. We got a brace. All right. Nope. Let's do. Okay. So now we're seeing the authorization plugin saying, hey, you told me you want to do authorization checks with me, but you didn't do any. So you should probably get on that. This is a development level error. If we were to turn debug off, this error would not fire, I don't think. I can't remember. But more importantly, it happens after your controller runs. So if we look at where that happens, your controller runs right here, right? So, the queue, the middleware, authorization plugin runs, then the next middleware in the stack runs, which will be based on this will be, there's nothing. So the next middleware after this is your application, which runs your controllers. So the controller has already run. The controller method has already run. And then at the end of that controller method, the authorization plugin says, hey, did you forget to check? Did the person check authorization? And this is meant completely as a development aid, so that if you see this error in development or in production, hopefully not, you know that you've missed an authorization check and that you should go back and add one in. All right, so how do we do that? So let's start off in our file share, what is it called? File share links controller. Okay, first we're going to go into app controller. There's a few basic things we need to get going. So the first thing we're going to do is load the authorization component. Authorization. Okay, so we're going to do that. And I think that's all we need in app controller for now. Let me just check. Yeah, that'll be good for now. And then we want to go to our file share links controller. And we want to, now that we have a file share link, we can check that the user has authentication, is authorized to use it. So the way we can check authorization is there's two main ways. First is we can do authorization authorize. That's the simplest way in a controller. You can do file share link in here, right? And what this will do is look at the type of this, which is going to be like a file share link, and then it'll find the policy for it. And based on the controller action, it knows which permission you want to call. So it's going to use the controller action as the permission. So it's going to say, it's going to look for the file share link policy and see if the current user can view this resource. That's what's going to happen. So if we were to view this, it's going to say, I can't find the policy class. There's no policy. So let's make a policy class. Because we loaded the plugin, we can use bake to get the policy. Use bake to generate a policy. So we'll do that. Bake policy. And what we want to do is we want to generate an entity policy. So we'll type this entity. We want to generate for the file share link. And we'll do the same thing for the file as well. Okay. So policy, we have two policies now. We have the file share link policy and the file policy. So let's build the file share link one. All the methods are empty because we kind of expect you to do it. So who can access a file share link? In our system, everyone can. Yeah, so everyone can do that. And basically policy methods are intended to return one of two things. They either have to return a Boolean saying whether or not you can or cannot do the thing. The other option that they can do is return a result object. And the result object is for when you want to return a response that has more detail in it. So they're not allowed, but here's why. Whereas like returning a Boolean just lets you say yes or no. That kind of that's how that works. So if we go, no, not there. If we go here, the server's not running again. Life with only two terminals. So now we can see the file share, but if we were to go to edit file, it's obviously not going to work. There's a whole bunch of stuff on this that we don't want to have. Also, if we were to go to like list files, we'll get another authorization check problem. So then we're going to kind of end up going around our application and writing policies. So let's just focus on this page for now. And what we want to do is get this. We have this view that we're sharing, but we also want to like restrict access. Like this link shouldn't work for people who are using a file share token. Like it would be nice if we didn't even show this to those file share link users. And like the same with this one, all these links should probably go away. The whole block should probably go away. Down here, like this shouldn't be shown for people who are authenticated with a file share link, right? Like all of this stuff should just kind of go away. So because we have two kinds of users in our application, we're gonna write some methods, and we're gonna do two kinds of methods. We're gonna have like a protected method. Protected function is share link, and that's gonna be an identity interface, right? That's the identity. It's gonna return a Boolean. And what we're going to check here, we're going to check like if the identity, call it identity, if the identity contains, so we're going to get the original data, which is the data inside of the identity. Is that a file share link? If it is, then we want to do some different stuff. So can file share link users edit? No, I don't think they can. So if this is a file share link, identity, if it's a file share link identity, then we're going to return false. Always return false. File share link people can't do things. That's called user. Right, and then maybe we'll do return true for now. So nothing will have changed in our view, but what we can do is we can go into the files view. Actually, sorry, before that, we can go into our app controller, and we can do something kind of fun. So we can implement function before render, and what we're going to do is we're going to call parent, and we're going to pass in the event, and what we're going to do is we're going to set the identity. We're going to call it identity just because we have a user object in our application, and reusing user will be complicated it'll make our lives hard. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the request and get the attribute. So get attribute identity. And the identity, after the authorization plugin and the authentication, like the authentication plugin will put the identity into the identity attribute on a request. Or request attributes are just kind of like a key value store of like arbitrary data you want to stick on a request. So the params are in there, a bunch of stuff is in attributes. And so the identity is there, and then when authorization runs, it picks the identity out of the attributes and then wraps it in another object and then puts it back. Yes, you can use the identity helper instead, but I'm doing it hard mode. Not hard mode, it's just how I think about it. There is a helper that, yeah, as I've pointed out, there is a helper that can help you with this. And I do that in App Controller just so that in every view I have access to the identity. And so we just did file share link policy, we did the update method, so now we're going to go back and check the update policy. So we want to do updates, we want to do like put some PHP in here. If the identity can, and then the first thing in can is the thing, so we want to do update, and we want to pass in the file, right? And we'll just make this whole thing a PHP block, right? That's probably be easier. And we can change this to name file, so this goes always the right place. All right, so now if the identity can update the file, then we'll show a link. Otherwise, no. I don't know how to write PHP anymore. Brain has gone to mush. This probably will work a little bit better. I forgot a semicolon over here. Pre-authorization check must return authorization result interface or null. What is going on? Form check. All right. So something's not right in our policy. Can update. Normally I would try and write tests for all of this, but we're trying to go fast. Pre-authorization check. What's going on in pre-authorization? There's no pre-authorization check. The view is going. Calling can. Are we calling can the wrong way? Is that what's going on? Doesn't know what that is. Let's just try switching the arguments. Oh, I know what's going on. All right. So we're passing a file object in, and the file object will resolve to the file policy, which we have not built. So file policy returns nothing. So we could do return true here, and then we would, go back to our file share policy. I'm realizing you guys can't see. Share policy, and then we can, we're going to copy and paste for now. But you can also, policies don't have a base class. So you can always do extends at policy, right? And you can put like a whole bunch of helper methods in there and fill that up with like all kinds of little goodies for making your policies easy to read and easy to write. We're going to copy and paste right now because for reasons. I don't know. I just feel like it right now. And then we're going to borrow the same kind of logic here. Yeah, you can build them in, you can put them in the identity interface as well. Right now, we're not implementing the identity interface, but we can do that if folks are interested in seeing how that works. We can kind of go through how that would work. So now, edit file should not show up. Why is it showing up? What is user? What is user? How is a user? What user would I be? Here's an identity, and inside the identity is a file share link. All right. So what is that file share link? Let's go. Okay, so you folks can see. No. Okay. So it's a file share link. Oh, of course. In my haste to copy and paste, I forgot to import the right thing. So the file name, the class name didn't really do anything. Okay, so now our edit link is gone. And so we can kind of do the same thing in our delete method, right? We can go into delete, and we can go into view. View will just be return. No, return. Let's do something fun for return. Let's just do return true. So in here we could do stuff like make sure the link, the share token is for the file, but that's going to be required by the references, by the foreign keys. But when we get around to doing user permissions, there'll be some more interesting logic we'll put into here. As for create, it's going to be the same kind of logic here for files. File share link users, file share people can't create, share link people can't create files, but they can use them. Okay, so now if we go back to our file edit, we just convert all of this into one big block of PHP, and we just go like this. Identity can, what is it, delete? So if they can delete the file, then we'll give them a link for that, and then consequently, subsequently, we'll also do the same kind of thing over here. Yeah, and then we can do like if they can view. Yeah, let's just do view file. We'll make up a new permission for that in a second. Let's not do that right now. This is add. And then all these links are kind of wrong, so we'll just change these to be files delete. And this is going to be files list. And this one's going to be files add. And this has to be name. Like that. Oops. What does this say? File policy add has not been defined. Well done. Yes, we call it create. Let's just go back and change that. So as you can see, the name used here directly corresponds to the name used for the method. So your policy method names don't have to be anything specific. They can kind of be tailored to your application and to the operations your application has. So maybe you had like export to the flues nozzle, right? To the flues nozzle, right? Like if flues nozzle is a thing, you could make that a specific action and make that a specific policy check. So it's a really flexible system that allows you kind of like model any kind of, any kind of thing you really need. Similarly down here, we could go in here, change this into a PHP block, and then we have if identity can create, and we're just going to pass in a new file share link. So this is how you can, model create permissions. You don't really have, entity to check with. So you can either create it in line. Another approach that you could do that would be equally or maybe more valid, better valid, would be to, you could pass in, you could do like this, right? And we could do pass in the file. Maybe that's a better way to model that. I'm getting very like obsessed with aligning things, but right, like we could make our permission create share link, right? Like that'd be pretty neat. So then we can go into our file policy, and we can define a new method, which is, so we can do this. The memory of a goldfish. What we're doing files view. Create share link. And it'll pack a file, and if it's a share link user, the answer is no, otherwise it's true. my helpful contributor to for. Okay, let's look at our files controller. So we built a bit of our files policy, right? So let's build a little bit more of our file policy. Yeah, this combination of computer, router, and internet is just not having a good day today. Yeah. Anyways, so we're going to continue trying to finish this. All right, so we wrote some of our code, and now we want to do some group-based policies. So our files have groups in them, and so what we want to do is, kind of limit who can access or who can modify or delete files based on the group, right? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to, in our file policy, we're going to have like a method which again could be, because I don't have better names right now, and so we're going to, make sure that the file and the identity interface, there it is, make sure that they are in the same group, or that they have an overlapping group or intersecting group, depending on how you want to think about it. So we can get all of the users' groups. So our users have more than one group, right? That's how that works. Entity user. Yeah. Table. Yeah. So our users have. Let's keep. Yeah. So we get groups. Groups. And we're going to make sure that the groups the user is in are also the groups that the file is in. The reason for this is, like, in a group-based identity model, we kind of want to make sure that you only change the files you're allowed to look at. Get original data, and then we're going to just go over the groups, right? We call that identity, user, and then what we want to do is make sure that the file in rat. That's how I feel. The files group is also inside intersects with the files groups. So if the user belongs to at least the group, one of the user's groups owns the file, then the user and the group are the same. The user and the file are in the same group, and the user can delete the file or modify the file, all that kind of jazz. So then we're going to go down here and we're going to return like this in group, and it's, what is in group? Takes the file and takes the user, right? And we're flipping the arguments here, which isn't great, but let's just fix that. It's kind of annoying. I'm going to just switch these around. Okay. Not identifier, identity. Cool. Okay. Is internet in Canada very expensive and bad? It's somewhat true. My internet is extra bad because I have to use it for Netflix. So I've asked them not to do that, but I'm in a different room and can't make them listen. working from home is the best, right? Who doesn't love it? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to log out so we can test all of this stuff out. Users log out to not apply authorization checks. Oh my goodness, you're going to be super annoying. So authorization plugin can be kind of annoying. It's going to ask you to do stuff on every single action all the time. So if you don't have a resource and you know that you don't need to do any authorization checks, yeah, you're not allowed to log out. Yeah, it's so secure, you can't ever leave. There's a way to do that. I'll make this so you can see. That's not, I'm going to go to 154. So there's a skip method. Yeah, so you can skip authorization, and this will simulate that an authorization check has been done, but not actually do it. So now we should be able to log out. So now we're able to log out. And if we had forgotten the authorization check, this is always a super fun thing. If you forget the authorization check, it'll tell you that you're not allowed to log out in either. So you can make super secure systems that no one can actually use. Longer poking stick. No, I think it's just my new laptop does not like my router. So I'm going to try and get a new router in the next couple of weeks. Just because it makes my life hard. Okay, so yeah, page did not apply authorization checks. So the authorization plugin is is very pedantic. That's the way I would describe it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It is just how it, I don't know. I think it's kind of good for an authorization system to be pedantic. So I don't feel bad about making it a very pedantic system. Because I'd rather, always say no than accidentally say yes. So just fix where that redirect's going. Use our fancy new route. Yeah, files do not apply an authorization check. So one thing, the authorization checks do help make it safe. One thing to keep in mind is that the authorization, like you did not apply any authorization checks, happens after your controller. So if your controller does like a bad operation or mutates data, that will still happen, and then authorization will be like, whoa, now let's shut this down. So it is not intended to keep your application secure in production. It's entirely intended as a development aid, so that you forgot to check authorization. You can catch it in a development or in tests or in a QA environment. It's not intended to keep you safe in production. That will be my caveat. So we can do another type of authorization check. So currently we've been looking at resource authorization checks, but paginating through a list of files and checking authorization one at a time, it's going to be hideous. It's not going to work. So instead, what we can do is we can do what are called scopes. So we can scope a query based on an authorization policy. So what we're going to do is do just that. So we're going to do this authorization. We're going to do apply scope. Apply scope. I always forget what it's called. We're going to think it's this. Files. Find. Okay, so query, yes, that's not how PHP is written. And so we're going to paginate based on a scoped, scope. And for that, we're going to need another policy. Because the way policies work, you get one policy for entities and one policy for not entities. For the ORM resolver resolves one set of policies to entities and one set of policies to tables, which are query based. Yeah, so we're going to make policy. So let's make sure we start our server again. Files table policy. And the files table policy we're just going to do, public function apply scope. I think that's what it's called. We get a query. Okay, user and query, right? Then and this is a query. And it's going to return a query. And make the code not trash. So we'll return query. And inside of here, what we're going to do is, yeah, you're not wrong. If you know what the policy should contain, yeah, maybe we can make it better. But right now, Bake doesn't really know much about what should go in it. So let's make another finder, and we'll make this finder, for groups, or owned. Well, yeah, for group, for groups, yeah, groups. And the option, the groups, we'll pass in the user's groups. User groups, like that, right? That sounds like it should work. Let's just double check that. The thing I want to check is whether I'm using the right method, the apply scope method. I don't remember if it's called apply scope. It's been a while since I had to use it. Check authorization. Plus you get to see where all the docs are. Apply scope conditions. It is called apply scope. Sweet. We have to name the scope. So we're going to name the scope index. And this will be, what is the policy called? I think it's going to be called policy scopes, scope index. Look at all those helpful docs. Scope index, right? That matches that. And then we get a user and a query. And we're going to do a finder. Okay, so then we're going to go into our files table. Save that. Our files table. And we're going to write a public function find for groups. And we're going to take a query. And some options. And we're going to return a query. Same thing as before. If empty options group. Groups, that's what we call it. And we're going to throw new runtime exception, need some groups. And then we're going to get the group IDs. So the same kind of array map function group. And we passed in the actual group objects. You could potentially write like smarter code that maybe the user has an accessor that exposes the group IDs. But for now, we're not going to do that. And then we'll return query. And then we want to just do where files.group ID. And we want it to be, if group IDs, right? So what's wrong here? Oh, right. right, so we turn the groups into a list of group IDs and make the group condition. Well, it seems like it should all work in theory. Server's running. So now if we go back to our server, I'm going to specify the file scope must be type string or null. I'm just good. Okay. Files control. Files control. And we have this wrong. We don't need this. Does this work in Cake4? Automatically that groups as an array in the where. Yes, this does work. So that it'll automatically generate a list, an in list. Mark Scherer says no. Ah, bummer. But we can make it work. We have the technology, people. Just slam an in there. And we're good as gold. Yes, so I guess along the lines of what Mark Scherer has pointed out, you do need the in and is. The reason is that we want to be more strict with bindings. And the is an extra special case, because if you access an undefined array key, you would get like null, and then we don't want that turning into a condition where we've checked that user ID is null. Like we remove the ability to like automatically cast to handle null cases automatically. You have to be explicit about whether you want to do an is check against null, because sometimes we get string casted into empty string. Like null could be cast into empty string if you're going through a string column. So we need to be able to separate like whether it's an empty string being turned into null, or whether you just like don't know what you're doing or you made a mistake. So it's a little bit extra strict. And so we're only seeing one file here. But if we go into Postgres, we can see that there are two files. One of them is for group 2. And if we look at the user, we can see that it's a user. And there's nothing there, nothing to see. Users. And so we can see that group user 2 is only in group 1. And my user was 2. Because the first user I made didn't work. So my user is 2. So what we've done now is we've applied an authorization check, to our query. So our list page has an authorization check. We've filtered it down to only the files that the current user is allowed to see. And we've done all of that, and it's still paginated. So we have a paginated list with authorization applied, and took us, our controller's only 2 lines of code. We could even like that down further if we want to like factor this out and put that into a finder over here. But I don't think that's necessary. So yeah, so that's the way you can like build authorization systems into your application with not a ton of overhead, and it adds a little bit of rigor, because you have to go around and make sure you define all these policies and connect all the policies up to all the controller endpoints. But at the end of the day, you can reuse those policies across multiple controllers, right? So if we were to go into files controller add, we already defined the policy for the file controller. So we could easily just go in here and just do, our amount of work we have to do is authorization, authorize file, right? Like that's all the work we have to do. Every controller endpoint gets one additional line of code. So yeah, and then the whole thing is like is all working. And we've like, if we go down, then you can like wire up your views to all the policies. Your controllers can all be wired up to your policies. And if you pass the user into like service classes or into domain logic classes, that user object also has a can method on it. So let's just look at that. So we can do things based on that user object. So a lot of times people ask like, oh, how do I check permissions from my models, right? Because I need to check permissions in the models. So, and I can't get to the authorization plugin from inside of a model. And so the way I do that is, apparently I've changed something here. You know, they say, oh, it's too hard. So we can like clean up all the bad stuff. Purge files for user, right? Like maybe we have some sort of, maybe not purge, but like some sort of bulk update. Do thing to files. My brain is not working right now. And so say we wanted to do a bulk operation to files based on a user, but we wanted to like constrain it based on their role or based on their group, or we didn't want to like pre-calculate the groups that they were in. So inside your model functions, if you pass that identity object into a thing, you can still do can on things. So if you were to pass user into a service class where you're like coordinating between multiple domain object, like multiple models or multiple objects in your system, and you've defined policies for all of those objects, you can connect everything together and pass the user in as one of your parameters, and then you can use the authorization system deep in the bowels of anywhere, just like we were doing in the view templates. So you can check authorization in the view templates, you can check it in your model area, you can check it in your controllers. If you want to check it in shell commands, you can also do it there. Like you'll be able to build a user with a little bit of work, but you can do it inside your shell command. All right. I guess one other thing I wanted to go over is kind of console commands. Yeah, so we can go over building a console command. So the use case we have for our console command is just to, delete old files. Realize we're getting low on time, so I'll do this kind of quick. And this is a file like share link, file share link cleanup. So we're going to bake a new command. And commands are a great fit if your application has like CLI commands. An admin interface. A lot of times people will build web-based admin interfaces which is great for a larger project. For a small project, a lot of times you can get away with CLI tools, or you need to build like development tools for your team. Cake commands are a great way to do that. Obviously, if you can do it in a simpler tool like Make, or just like some simple shell scripts, preferred bias towards the simplest tool possible. But if you need access to your application code, Cake has a console system that'll help you get there. So right now our console command doesn't do much, but we can use the option parser to kind of define a few things. Let's just get the one I built before so I have something to look at. So we can do some interesting things, like we can add some options, so CLI flags. So we can add a format option in case we want to have multiple types of file outputs or multiple types of output. So the help is how to format results, right? And we can do choices, so we can give people a choice of two options, table and a list, and we can set a default value in case they don't define that. We can just do it as a list, and then we'll add another option, which is exec, which is actually like do the work. So our file share tokens will expire, but they don't get removed from the database. So this CLI tool is something you could run on a cron job, or whenever you're feeling like you want to clean data up. Cron's probably the easiest way. So we have two options that we've added. We've added a way to format the results, and then a way to actually execute the work. The reason I'm doing this is just to show more features of like how to build command line tools. Having like actually do it is good. I like command line tools that default to not destroying things. So I'm biased towards like safe mode, and then opt in to destroy the thing, kind of like you get in commands, you get this arguments and console.io. So console.io is how you print out or ask questions of the user, and arguments is the results of your parsed command line. So we can use output levels. There's 3 output levels. There's normal, verbose, and quiet. So yeah, we can make it quiet. If it wasn't quiet, then we can do some stuff. So we can do if args get option format is equal to list, and we can do something. Otherwise, it's not a list. And we can get a table helper. So if it's a table, we want to do IO as helper, the name of the method. We want to get the table helper, and then we're going to make some output. And so the output for a table helper is just a list of lists. And we'll kind of go over our results. We're going to do a query. We're going to assume we have a query somewhere. Results as results. And then we're just going to like append a row. We'll take results ID and result token, and results expires at. Kind of append all that together, and then we'll just output with the table helper, right? So then we're going to dump out to the CLI, and if it's a list, we can do something similar. We can, can do IO out, and then just squish all this stuff together. Yeah, so we just string format all this all together. Not the most elegant solution, but it'll work for our purposes. So now we need to get that query. So results is going to equal this file share links. And we're just going to find all the expired. All the expired.
I know, but if she goes on, then she might.
Sorry about that. Kids had to ask questions. Right. So now we want to find expire tokens. Find expire tokens. See, again, putting everything into finders makes it really easy to reuse across your application. I don't really care about the options, so we're not going to use them. I'm just going to do return query. I always want to do expires at. Expires at is in the past. Roses. we could potentially take an option to do that in the past. Like maybe there's an option to change how long ago we delete things at. Yeah, so finders are nice because you can stack them and put them together. And then we can go in here and make sure that our command got found. So we can see our command right here, file share link cleanup. And we can do file share link cleanup. And because we defined some options, Cake is able to like automatically generate help data for us. So we can run it without, and it says none need to be expired. So let's just update share link, file share links, set expires at to be 20 days, So yeah, so one should probably get deleted, and then we set the format to be table. It'll just yell at us that we did thing. So we can go into our cleanup, and I guess one of these is null. That's what I'm complaining about. Cell width must be type of string, null or int given. All right, so this must be an int. So we just turn that into a string. String. Oh, there are dates in there. No good at all. Let's do that. There we go, perfect. So that's kind of how you can use command line tools. And then if we were to go in here and just like, we can do some other fun things. So we could do, if, args, how to type, get option exec, because we haven't actually implemented actually deleting things. So we can do out and then delete tokens. We could confirm that, but they use the command line flag, so we don't have to do that. And then what we can do is we can actually just do another query, so we can find that, and then we can actually, I think this will work. I think this will work. Execute. Pretty sure this works. And then when we're all done, one other fun thing you can do with the command tools is you can, colorize output. So we have a few like built-in formats. You can define your own, obviously. But we have a few like success, we have error, we have warning, and they all kind of like output colorize output. Yeah, so we can do that, and then we get like the green all done. It says it's going to delete tokens. See if there's any tokens left. So does it trigger callbacks? No, it won't. Yeah, they all got deleted. So yeah, you can turn finders. That's another fun thing to use finders. Another good reason to use finders is you can turn them into delete queries. You can also turn them into update queries. So if you want to turn into an update query, you can do update, and then you can use the query builder functions related to updates. You can use like set, and you can set not trigger callbacks, because what this is going to turn into in the database is like delete like that. So it's going to turn into a bulk delete. So if you don't want to duplicate your query conditions into delete all, you can just convert find queries into delete queries. I'm pretty sure delete all also takes a query object as conditions. Let's just check, see see what the computers think. I'll look it up in the docs because I'm being lazy. Did share links. Use some ID magic. I think that works. Let's see. I think delete all will accept query conditions. Of course, it's not going to tell me. Okay, let's just go to docs. Bulk deletes. Delete all. Delete all takes conditions. So it looks like it just takes a list, but let's do some spelunking if people are interested. I can show you my workflow for finding out how Cake actually works. I just read the code. It's a tried and tested true formula of just read the source. And once you know it all, it just turns into code, and then it becomes easy to work on, right? Delete all takes conditions, which is inherit doc. What does inherit doc say? Okay, so it takes conditions. Conditions could be anything query where it can take. So it can take an expression, could take another query. You can use a subquery, so maybe we won't go that much deeper down that rabbit hole. All right, so that's most of what I had. I'm not sure if we have more. Maybe Amanda can message in Slack if we have more time. I'm not entirely sure what the timelines are right now.
Well, you're kind of the last one, so if you have a few things you want to cover, if you're done, you want to wrap it up, then we can do that.
And we're supposed to go until 2030. What time is it now? Oh my god, how do I UTC? It's 4:50. So we have another half hour? Yeah, half hour.
Originally I had it till
That's what I'm thinking.
about 20 minutes ago. We're actually a little bit over, but
let's find out what time it is in UTC. This is the most elaborate way possible to find out what time it is. That's not even what I'm interested in. 20:52, and we're supposed to be done at. We're supposed to be done. We've gone over. We're over by 20 minutes. Yeah, so I'm going to say we're over by 20 minutes. I'm really sorry for my continue better router for for next time. Hopefully next time we're all in person. We can all thank you for attending. Thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for putting up with my technical problems. Thank you, Mark Scherer, for filling in when my internet crapped out. yeah. Have a great night, depending on where you are, or morning. Yeah.
Okay, and we won't blame the Canadian internet, whether it's expensive or not. But thank you guys for being so patient. Thank you guys for hanging out with us all day today. We really, really hope you enjoyed these workshops. And we are excited to have a full day of conference talks tomorrow, which will be a little bit different. We'll hear from all different speakers with all different topics that may or may not be related directly to Cake PHP, but we're all excited to be back tomorrow. So hopefully you will join us, and you can hang out a little bit longer in the CakeFest chat. I know it's late for a lot of attendees, but some of our speakers will be hanging out there just a little while longer, but we hope to see you all tomorrow. Thanks for baking.